with that said, we're just going to jump right in. And the first person on the list is the statewide ballot measures is State Senate President Steve Fenberg. So let me advance the slide and we'll get Steve up. And I have the slides ready. Can everybody see that just fine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it's good.
All right. Then Tim, when you get the timer started. So Steve, the way we're going to handle this is because you're doing 2 presentations and Q&A for the statewide ballot measures. Do you just want a 15-minute timer? That's your timer for everything.
That should be fine. Yeah.
Okay. So. And I just want to explain before you start that for our members and for other people is that the way that the county parties work is after the state has had their central committee meeting, we and they take a vote on this. And the way that the central committee for the state voted is yes on HH and yes on II. As a county party, we can either choose to go along with what the state did or take no position on it. That's our 2 options. We do not oppose it if the state central committee has already voted one way or the other. So just that's informational. And whenever you're ready to start, Steve, I think Tim will start the timer.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Thanks for your whole team for all the work that you guys do to engage Boulder County Democrats. And ballot measures are especially important, and Boulder County plays a very important role on the statewide races and measures like these. So I'm excited to be having this conversation. Feel free to move forward on the slides. So if there's one thing you take away from this short presentation, it's that what HH is property tax relief, but property tax relief in a way that doesn't hurt all of those important services that rely on property taxes. So schools, libraries, fire districts, water districts, hospital districts, and many, many more types of districts that rely on property taxes. They rely on property taxes. This is a cut to property taxes, as you'll hear, but it's done in a way that doesn't hurt those services. So if there was a Prop HH for dummies, it would the question essentially boils down to, shall the state cut property taxes and then backfill those important services that property taxes pay for from the Tabor surplus? So it's reforming Tabor to allow the state to retain more money to be able to pay essentially what those services would have made if it wasn't for HH. Next slide. So the summary of HH is mostly captured on this slide. This doesn't talk about the pay for, but this is where the savings come from. So it basically does 3 things. Number 1, it reduces property taxes for all types of properties. So no matter the type of property you own, your assessment rate will be reduced. It won't be reduced a crazy amount, but it is proportional to the type of assessment rates that the property has. So commercial properties are higher right now because of Gallagher than residential properties, but everybody gets a reduction. But homeowners who live in their homes, so we're not talking about vacation homes, we're not talking about investment properties, but people who are actually paying their property taxes because they live there will get an additional deduction. And that's one of the aspects that makes this more progressive, because it's a dollar amount. So for lower income folks, for people who live in homes that are worth less, that deduction is much more meaningful than it is for somebody who lives in a much more expensive home. Secondly, it targets additional relief for seniors and for renters. It does this through increasing the senior homestead exemption and also making that exemption portable. Right now, seniors are actually disincentivized to move, because if you move, you essentially lose your senior homestead exemption, and it takes another 10 years to earn it back. And this is only for folks who are over 65 in the first place. So it allows that to be portable, which people have been asking for a very long time. And then secondly, it dedicates $20 million every year for low-income rental assistance. Obviously, we know that is not going to solve our problem when it comes to high rents, but it is, high rents are not it's not only because of high property taxes or property taxes going up, but that is if property taxes go up, that will be passed along to renters in the form of increased rent. So we want to make sure this also does something for renters. And then lastly, it caps future tax growth. It's not a hard cap. It is done in a way that provides local control and does not apply to school districts, importantly, but applies to other districts like fire districts and water districts. And essentially what it does is it caps the growth of the taxes for that district at the rate of inflation. And if the local governing board wants to follow that cap, they essentially lower their mill levies temporarily. If they don't want to and they want to retain the full funding that they're eligible for based on values in the area, they just simply take a vote at their governing board. A public vote has to have public notice, etc. But they can retain that full revenue. But the default is to actually put a cap on it so that property taxes grow in a more kind of sustainable manner. There is an alternative measure that some of you have probably heard about that I'm not going to get into tonight, but that measure has a hard cap. It's a statewide cap. It's 4%. It's constitutional and there's no way around it. We think it's much better to have this decision still live at the local level. Next slide. So people often at this point in time say, well, what's the catch? So if you click again, and then you can go to the next slide after that. Obviously, this has to do with Tabor. And if you've listened to the Republicans or the right wing that are opposing this, that is why they oppose this. So what HH does is it allows state revenue to grow by an additional 1%. You can click again. Having someone else do the slides and having animation, I guess, is kind of awkward. But if you want to click again, I'll go to the next slide. So this is what it does. It changes the Tabor cap. The current Tabor cap, and the Tabor cap, for those who are less aware, essentially restricts how much the state government budget can grow every year. It's currently based on inflation plus population growth. So we can grow at a rate of whatever inflation and population growth is combined. That's the rate that the state government budget can grow. The Tabor cap will be changed under HH to simply add 1% to that formula. So that 1% is the money that it will be retained that goes to pay back library districts, schools, fire districts, etc., because of the assessment rate reductions that HH puts in place. If there's money left over from that 1%, after everybody has been paid back or reimbursed or backfilled, however you want to phrase it, then that leftover money gets deposited into the state education fund. And this is the part that, frankly, in some ways, for a lot of people is very exciting because it holds schools and other services harmless. And then if there's additional revenue, and the projections are there will be, although we don't know for certain because that depends on how the economy is performing, it goes into the state ed fund, which is the pot of money that funds our public schools. And we are projecting that this towards the end of HH, we're talking like $2 billion in additional revenue for schools every year. This is meaningful, it's significant, and can make a major dent in sort of our underfunding of public schools that we've been doing now for at least a generation. So first, to summarize it, Prop HH really is, it's Tabor reform, it's more school funding, and it's a slightly more progressive property tax policy. And all of these things I think are good. And it's all wrapped up in one package to essentially use this moment to provide relief, but provide relief in a way that's more progressive than it otherwise would be if it was just simply flat relief, but do it in a way that actually uses our Tabor surplus, does not make cuts to schools or other services, and in fact, over time, will actually increase significantly our funding for public schools. So I mentioned that there is another measure that Republicans collected signatures for. It will be on the ballot in 2024, and it is a much more oppressive and top-down policy that would, I think, decimate public school funding. It puts a permanent cap on how much budgets can grow at the local level to 4%. So actually, it's 4% growth statewide. Nobody really knows how to implement that, but essentially what it will result in is probably solidifying Colorado's place in being one of the worst states in the country in funding public schools and K-12 education. Alternatively, we could do Prop HH, which is about $1 to $1.6 billion in savings every year, and actually is projected to increase funding for public schools and do in a way that is more progressive than the alternative. HH is being supported by a broad coalition of folks. As Amy said, the state party has endorsed it. The AFL-CIO has endorsed it. The teachers, the two teachers unions, so CEA as well as AFT, have endorsed it. The professional firefighters have endorsed it. We have a lot of support, and it's growing. A lot of the support is coming from the education community, but also from folks who are interested in progressive tax policy, like the Bell Policy Center or Colorado Fiscal Institute. And we're super excited about the coalition and the support that we have. I think that might be the last slide on HH. So I'll say a few things about II, which clearly I'm less involved in. I only have one slide, but it's obviously a lot less complex. II is a result of EE that was passed by voters in 2020, which was a tobacco tax that provided funds to help pay for universal preschool in Colorado. Super exciting. It's off the ground. It's been a little bumpy in some ways, but at the end of the day, I think we will figure it out. And the good thing is that we are providing more early childhood education for more families. Prop EE made an estimate of how much money it would bring in. And that estimate is in the Blue Book, and it's an official estimate by the nonpartisan economists at the Capitol. But the way Tabor is written, unfortunately, is that if their estimate is low, then the state does not have permission to retain all of that money that came in, because it's impossible to know exactly how many cigarettes people are going to buy, right? And so they make an estimate. It was slightly under, and there's about $23 million over their estimate that has been collected. And Tabor requires us to ask voters again in order to retain that money. So if we don't do this, or if II fails, we send that money back out in a refund. But importantly, it does not go to citizens. It is a refund that goes towards to nicotine and tobacco companies, not to actual people. So, to me, this is a no-brainer. Voters already approved this. If we reject this, it just simply gives money to tobacco companies. The additional funding is significant. It's not, gonna, again, change everything when it comes to universal preschool, but it is about enough money to provide 5,100 more children with additional preschool programs every single year. So it's meaningful. And to me, this is just another example of sort of how ludicrous Tabor is and the hoops we have to jump through in order to pass tax policy. But it's important, and I'm glad that the state party has endorsed it, and that hopefully it will pass this fall. I'll leave it there in terms of the presentation. Happy to answer a few questions. I know HH is complicated, and I'm also happy to have conversations with folks offline and answer questions outside of this forum as well.
So there's a question in the chat by Britta that says, do you think the news about problems in the Colorado's universal preschool program will reduce the likelihood of the passage of II?
It's a good question, Britta. I don't think so. I think people will read it and realize that it's kind of a no-brainer. They already voted for this. It passed quite easily. And I don't think people like the idea of just giving money back to tobacco companies, right? And even I think voters are smart enough to know that even if it's been sometimes bumpy in rolling out this massive program, it's still providing universal preschool to more families, and that's a good thing. And so I'm hopeful that II will pass.
Any other questions? You can raise your real hand, you can raise your virtual hand, or you can type the question in the chat. And again, the contact information will be in our master information document. Okay, here's one from Joel Smith. Will renters feel they can lose out because of the potential for reduced Tabor refunds and the risk of not having reduced property tax show up in reduced rent?
It's a good question. And this is part of the campaign discussion right now, meaning like out in the public. The opposition is Americans for Prosperity, which is the Koch brothers, Advanced Colorado, which is like a Colorado version of Americans for Prosperity. And one of their top messages is that this is bad for renters because it reduces their TABOR refunds. The reduction in TABOR refunds in 2023, actually, everyone gets a higher TABOR refund. Not everyone, but 65% of citizens get a higher TABOR refund if HH passes compared to if it doesn't pass, because we do a flat TABOR refund. In the next few years, it won't be flat, but the reduction in someone's TABOR refund is quite minimal. 2024, it's estimated to be $46. So our TABOR refunds these days are $700, $800, $900. In 24, HH is projected to reduce your refund by $46. So it's not a massive reduction in anyone's refund by any means. And I don't know if voters will see this. We're going to try to communicate it to them, but the Republicans are saying this is bad for renters. I didn't know that party was such a fan of providing relief and support for renters, but they will say that, in the campaign trail if it's to their benefit. But it's a political message that they're trying to use to beat HH. At the end of the day, I don't think landlords are inherently looking out for their renters' interests necessarily, in that if they have a tax cut, that it will be passed on to their renters. But I do know if they have a property tax increase, they will pass that on to their renters. And what this does is it doesn't reduce your taxes, it reduces the increase, because the increase is a result of your values going up. And there's nothing we can do about that ultimately. But what we can do is make that increase be less shocking to the system. And hopefully then they won't pass those increases on to renters nearly as much as they would if those increases were much more egregious.
Well, President Fenberg, we so appreciate you being with us tonight, and thank you for all your time and effort. And I know this isn't your only presentation. I know you've given this many times, and this is the second time to us. I really appreciate you and all that you've done. And I just am going to plug this because the state CC, the Central Committee, has already voted for it, and I am for both of these. So I just want to let everybody know that.
Well, thank you, Amy, and thanks to the whole team. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. We will move on. The next presentation is Boulder County ballot measures by our two of three esteemed county commissioners, Marta Lochamin and Ashley Stolzman. And we'll be starting with Ashley. And I will get to the first slide here.
Good evening. Can you hear me, Amy?
I can.
Perfect. It's great to hear everybody and see everybody that has their screen on. So all three commissioners supported these taxes and have passed resolutions of support. We're dividing up the presentation. So Commissioner Levy, Commissioner Loachman, and myself are all happy to bring forward some proposals for the community to consider. And I have the pleasure of talking to you this evening first about our open space tax extension. So hopefully everybody who's on the call has had an opportunity to experience our open space here in Boulder County. We have over years come up with this community asset that people get a great benefit from, but it also takes money to protect and preserve and continue to maintain that. So we are asking people to consider, and let me say on the onset, without raising taxes, this is an extension of an existing open space tax, but we're asking people to consider extending it going forward. So it's a 0.05% sales tax that we currently have in place that we'd like people to consider keeping in place. And if you could go to the next slide. So you can see on this map in the dark forest green are open space lands of the county. In sort of the limey green color, you can see lands that the county maintains a conservation easement over, and then other colors on the map represent other types of properties that we have in the community. And why I have this picture here is just so folks can see that we have over time protected a lot of land for people's enjoyment, for agricultural uses, for buffers, for wildlife. There's a variety of reasons, and the different zones of the county, you can see those different reasons. If you could go to the next slide. So some of those reasons are listed out here. People do get to use the properties for passive recreation, but if you're not a recreator, if you're not a runner or biker and you haven't been on a hike recently, there's still benefit. So there are view corridors. Like if we wouldn't have done this over time, if the previous commissioners and the community had not supported this over time, we really wouldn't have views of the mountains. When you think of other communities along the Front Range, when you drive through them, you just see the strip malls. You cannot see past that row. And because of this careful planning, there are these scenic corridors that we've maintained and buffers between our communities. When you drive from one community to the other, you can tell you've left somewhere and gone somewhere else. And there's also wildlife habitat. So even if you haven't personally gotten to enjoy it, and I hope everybody on the call has, there's still the benefit to the wildlife being able to have careful migration corridors that are important. There are grounds where the animals are breeding and having their young. There are really important sensitive ecosystems that are protected as well. And last but not least, a very important benefit of the program that would be basically extinct from Boulder County without it is our agricultural heritage. So in the community, we have this opportunity with this ag land that has been preserved to really take some steps forward and help our food security. Right now, only 2% of our food is grown in Boulder County, actually less than that. And we have an opportunity to do more carbon farming with the ag land that we have. So these are some of the benefits. There are many more. We can go to the next slide. This is just some of the by the numbers for folks on the call to consider. So there are about 116,000 acres that we are maintaining for community, 25,000 in ag, 30,000 forest, and 40,000 conservation easements. Why those numbers are important is if you think of like a road right-of-way project that comes through that may need an easement, we have to protect and promote and preserve the open space and do negotiations on those, or an oil and gas lease. If they try to come in, we have to do our best on ensuring that the ecosystem is protected. And so we really do have to maintain and care for those lands. You can see in the picture some of our great volunteers. The community is blessed with over 2,500 volunteers that help us keep our costs down and really steward the land. But even with all of that community assistance and benefit, we still have over 150 staff that are full-time that maintain those trails, do weed pulling, that help manage the leases, that do the different property acquisitions and things like that. And there are 350 historic structures, actually a little over that we manage and maintain on the open space as well. And so just on the last, you can go back one, sorry, before we go on to Marta's presentation. So I just, on this slide, will just say, with all of that, maintaining and managing the land is really important, but the last piece is that there are some key acquisitions too that are allowable by this tax. So the community has prioritized and identified 3 regional trail corridors that they're looking to build. One is a Boulder to Lyons bikeway that would have some open space access on it. That trail runs along the #1 fatality trail corridor that we have. And so being able to build that would reduce our bike accidents and fatalities that are avoidable if we could do something like that. There's also the Boulder to Erie trail that's been identified and the Longmont to Lyons trail. Those key corridors could need some property acquisitions to complete some of the right-of-ways and easements. So this text does also allow for those critical acquisitions going forward. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Hey, does anybody have any questions for Commissioner Stolzmann?
And while you're thinking of your questions, Amy put in the chat, and it's very important to know this will be ballot measure 1A on your ballot.
Questions?
And Helen asked in the chat, is this tax expiring? And yes, it expires in 2024. So it's to consider asking the voters to consider extending it for another 15 years.
Any other questions? All right, if you have them, there are on our resource sheet that you all have access to. There are ways to contact the commissioners there. Oh, here's one from Joel Smith. What share of the revenues goes to maintenance of existing open space versus purchase of new open space lands?
It's a hard question, Joel, because it's very lumpy. So for example, Bald Mountain was acquired and that was expensive and purchased. And so then that throws things out of whack, whereas maintenance is an ongoing cost. I can try to nail like a 10-year picture down for you, Joel, and send it to you where I can break down the acquisition and the maintenance year by year. But what throws it out of whack in the way that you've asked the question is like those purchases, when they do come, are expensive. And buying the last critical pieces, like land, keeps going up in price. There was another question from Britta about what are some of the historic structures. I was at 4 Mile Canyon today, working on a different project actually, but there's a historic parks and open space maintained structure up there that's quite beautiful. There are several historic farms, including Harney Listoka. There's some up in Longmont. And then Walker Ranch, of course, has some historic structures that are maintained and cared for. Those are just a few examples. And then Tamar asked how this tax fits into the overall county open space tax. It is a braided set of taxes that have been passed over time. This 0.05 tax actually was passed originally at a time as a 0.1 tax, and half of the 0.1% tax was written in perpetuity, and half of it was set for the community to consider on a 15-year basis. And the half that was set in perpetuity is for maintenance. And so this half is the half that the community reconsiders that's for maintenance or acquisition, that has some more flexibility. Ooh, lots of questions on this one. And there are some questions about some recent land use decisions. The reason I'm hesitating on this one, there's a question about what was the commissioner's decision to rescind the Kanemoto Estates designation. The reason I'm hesitating is because there's pending litigation around that. And so I'm just thinking to myself, what would the lawyers ask me to say? And I think the answer is nothing. So maybe I have to pass on that. And then the next question, but there are a whole bunch of quotes in public hearings you can read in the paper if you want to know what happened. And then Amy asked around, what about organic county lands that was set to have 20% organic by 2020? Is that still being implemented? And what I would say on that is the vision that was set has not been fulfilled yet. We're not there. All the commissioners, all 3 commissioners are committed to regenerative agriculture, and we're still actively discussing how we get there and what that means. We have a really active, engaged agricultural community that's very important to Boulder County, not just for food security and for our ag heritage, but also because of the potential for carbon farming and the ability to really help with the greenhouse gas emissions issue. And the last question should be a softball, and let's see if I have it right at my fingertips. 0.05%, how much is that? So 0.185% is about 18 million. And so sorry, and somebody, don't make me do math live, but 0.185 is 18 million. And so it's quite a bit less than that. And someone with a calculator can tell me what 0.05 is.
I'll just share
rapid fire questions.
I would say around 4, just based on the point.
Thank you, Marta.
That we were working on last year.
Saved by Commissioner Lochimin. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you so much for the great questions. I see my timer counted down. And so if there are more questions, I'm happy to get coffee with anybody. Happy to answer questions offline. You can find my email online, no problem, or just text me. And hopefully you can see the signs in the background and consider supporting the measure. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate this presentation, and right on time. So Tim, I just want to mention 5 minutes on the timer, and then 5 minutes for questions and answers is the way that that everybody's expecting it to be.
Alrighty.
Okay, so now we're going to go to Commissioner Lochimin, and we will talk about affordable housing, which is, I think this is 2A, isn't it?
1B, thank you.
Oh, 1B, sorry. Yeah, I went the
That's
wrong
okay.
direction in my mind. All right, whenever you're ready to begin.
Great. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. I am really pleased to be able to share this tax measure with everybody. So we'll go through a few slides. But first, the common question around affordable housing, and I want to mention Anne Marie Jensen, who's the campaign chair. You can get a hold of either one of us in regards to just endorsement, support, signs, all the good things. We're simultaneously presenting to community members right now about 1B. So affordable housing in general, when we talk about what is affordable housing, this measure actually includes attainable housing as well. And we talk about affordable housing from a standpoint of around 80% area median income folks spending more than 30% of their income on housing is under that would be affordable housing. What we know, and we'll see some of those numbers, is we're in a very different situation here in Boulder County. The attainable housing is 80 to 120% area median income, or the AMI, and that includes like workforce housing. So when you see the ballot measure, the resolution, and you're looking at your blue book, et cetera, that's what we're talking about. So we can keep moving on this, and we'll come back to some of the other pieces. Thank you. I can't imagine, we're not all in the room here together, but I can't imagine that anybody would argue that we do have a housing crisis and we have an issue of affordability in Colorado, but also specific in Boulder County. I won't read through all of these details. It's a snapshot there of where we really are of housing prices, rental prices that have increased. The data point here that I do want to share is that 14% of our, when we talk about Boulder County, 14 of our Boulder County population is service occupation, and 65% of our workers in Boulder County are driving alone. So when we talk about housing, we're also talking about the climate impacts. We're talking about mental health pieces. We're talking about all of the other stressors that come with prices and the cost of living around Boulder County. And we can go to the next piece here. What we also know is that 16,000 of our Boulder County households spend more than half of their income on rent. So when we talk about affordable at 30%, we know that we're way over that for a lot of our residents and certainly workers that participate in Boulder County. What is important on this piece is when we talk about what is the need for sustainable funding, and that slide back there. What I do want to just make sure folks know that the RHP there, that acronym means Regional Housing Partnership. And our regional housing partnership estimates in 2018 that we would need to triple the 2018 inventory of affordable housing by 2035. To do that, their goal number was about $25 million annually. And this particular tax extension, the estimated revenue for 2023, because it's a current tax as well, current sales and use tax, is about 17 million. So we know that this is a piece of the puzzle to have a sustainable funding source. But we used about $1 million of ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act, to reinvigorate the Regional Housing Partnership. And so we're really looking at them as potential, the folks that can help us respond in regards to allocation and what happens once this ballot measure passes. You can go to the next slide. Thanks so much for the help. So what is the funding going to be used for? Again, this is a 0.185% current tax. Voters in 2014, after the 2013 flood, were generous as voters to approve a new tax at that time, which was flood recovery funding. In 2018, that five-year tax was then voted on by taxpayers to do the building, capital infrastructure, and operational costs of the alternative sentencing facility. We just did a groundbreaking about 6 weeks ago. And so 2024, this tax expires. And so now we're asking voters to use this current sales tax, not change it in any way, except to now move it towards an allocation of affordable and attainable housing and housing support services. So here's what the funding will be worked on. When we talk about development, we're talking about entitlements, acquisition costs, all the really fine details of how you do reconstruction, retrofit, renovation. Affordable housing, we talked a little bit about what those pieces are from a definition standpoint, but we're talking about rentals, for sale, home ownership, mobile home communities. Some of the ARPA funding we used here was also to allow for resident-owned communities to buy their own properties, and we still have some of those in Boulder County. And the last one is support services. And that looks like some of the work that Boulder County already does in our HHS Housing Human Services Department for home buyer coaching, eviction prevention, mediation services, and really some services for folks who are either on the brink of or experiencing homelessness. That's what we are working on right now. This is the solution we are coming up with in regards to a sustainable funding source that we do not have right now in Boulder County. So I saw the timer and happy to respond to some questions. And again, this is 1B.
All right, who has questions for Commissioner Lochamin about 1B, affordable housing. I really haven't looked into this that much, but is the affordable housing plan throughout the county and the plains and the mountains and the cities and?
Yes, so the funding would come just like our other county funding taxes. So think the wildfire mitigation tax from last year, the emergency services tax from last year that are countywide. And again, the conversation right now, and we have not got into the nitty gritty, and our staff can't work on this ballot measure right now because of Campaign Finance Act. So as soon as November 7th happens, and we're very optimistic about a yes vote, then right now my thought is regional housing partnership, because they're so well versed and they are regional, have regional representation, and have been working on this bigger topic and broader topic of housing geographically around the county, that they'll be the first group to be very involved in giving us guidance and recommendations on the allocation of funding.
Thank you. And there's a question from Guy. I'll just read it for everybody. There have been a lot of complaints about
Okay,
this.
thanks.
Do you want to read it? Or did
I
you
can
want-
read it. There have been a lot of complaints about the City of Boulder's nonprofit affordable housing management company, a lot of complaints, appropriately named Thistle, as well as Boulder Housing Partners, which operate as black boxes. Who and how is affordable housing generated by this tax being operated, and how is transparency and accountability being assured? I may have been answering that question as a guy was typing. Again, using the regional housing partnership is the initial idea. We pool historically and over the last few years have polled, and every poll continues to show that the residents in Boulder County who respond to that, the number one primary concern is affordability of housing. And we've been having conversations with our partners and in the HHS department again, to just get to this point, to be able to put this on the ballot. But the other piece of accountability we're going to be building in once the ballot measures passed.
Thank you.
And if I didn't totally answer your question, Guy, because I think I was talking, you were typing, feel free to add anything else.
Anybody else have any questions? Going once, going twice. All right, we will.
That's
thank you very
great.
much. Oh, Guy
I
has his
see a
hand up.
hand, yeah.
Yep, go ahead, Guy. Just unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, no, that did not answer my question at all. How do we
Okay.
know that friends of people who work for management or whatever are getting the best deals? I mean, what is the transparency in the operation of how this, once they're built, how is it going to be assessed by people who fall within those income guidelines? Because I know of some very serious abuses that have happened in the City of Boulder program.
So what would the enforcement be for housing authorities who receive funding from this tax? Is that your question?
Yeah, how do we know that it's being operated in a transparent, fair, and these are all Boulder County Democrats, priorities is accountability and transparency. So how do we know that it's being operated in a fashion that is on the up and up? Is it going to be sort of a black box thing where they'll use all kinds of privacy excuses to say, oh, we can't tell you who's getting what, or which county staff member, or in this case, the ones I know about, which City of Boulder staff members, friends are getting affordable housing, and the people that aren't. So what is being done to assure transparency and accountability with the proceeds from this?
Thanks. So what I can speak to is what we'll be doing on the county side, and then I wrote down some of your questions that we're collecting during this campaign piece to figure out where this fits long term. So what I'm hearing is two things. One is the folks who receive the money, what is the accountability and transparency for those agencies who receive it? What I can speak to is from our side of the transparency and accountability of the actual receipt of funding from taxpayers and how that money is going to be distributed. What I can share with you just in my short 3 years here at the county is working on the $63.3 million ARPA community engagement process and how that program was worked to create transparency. The website, if you go on the website, and that's something we've been rolling out over the last 3 years with our Open Gut site. So you can look on there and click on there and see where the funding is, what project it's going to, and it's updated consistently and has been over the last couple of years. So that's just one example. The other one would be the emergency services ballot measure that I led last year and just now finishing up that committee. It's been almost a full year of this kind of work. Who needs to be at the table? What's the criteria? And then how do we transparently share out with folks what kind of public meetings? If we've added a lot of those pieces in the process. Does that answer more of what your question is, Guy?
Can I say something too, Guy?
Of course.
Just this is Ashley Stolzman, another one of the Marta's colleagues. So just on this, this money would not go directly to housing authorities or directly to it would come to the Boulder County commissioners. And then, just like our other grant programs that Commissioner Loachman is talking about, we have criteria. People have to apply. There's documentation. They come to the public business meetings where we, rank projects against one another and fund the best projects. And so like an example of this is the worthy cause tax that exists, where we fund other organizations, nonprofits, housing authorities, and things like that. And there's a competitive process where things are ranked, public testimony is taken, like community members can come tell us about projects they like or don't like, and then the commissioners are ultimately the ones held to account.
Oh, okay, but you're still talking about stuff at the county level.
Okay, Guy, I'm sorry. Just because we have an agenda tonight and a time frame, could I ask you to engage with the commissioners offline about this?
Well, if I can just finish what I've been trying to ask is, once it gets to another organization, a nonprofit, a particular project, whatever, how is who gets those units going to be shown to be fair, transparent, and that's what I'm asking. So it's not at the county level. I understand the process for distributing the money at the county level. It's once it's distributed, who ends up moving into these affordable housing units.
So you're asking for accountability and fairness all the way up and down the process is what Guy is trying to get to.
Yeah, and the portion of the response that I shared, Guy, is that I wrote that down because that for me is feedback about what is that, to me, that's not our process. It's the accountability for the funding that we give. And that, quite frankly, is a question that I'm having around all of the funding that we give out. To really look at what our partners doing when they've applied and said they're going to use this money in this way. Same thing with the grants that we receive for our own departments. So I don't know if that's helpful, but Commissioner Stolzman, I saw you might want to add in something as well.
No, I think it's a great question. I appreciate your response, Commissioner. And we have a number of performance metrics people who receive grants and services have to perform to. And I'd be really interested to hear the details of the specifics of what you've heard of going on, guys. So I'd love to get coffee. Marta put her email in the chat. I just like to dig in a bit more on the specifics of this issue.
Thank you. I think that's great. And we'll go ahead and leave both Marta and Ashley spotlighted because we're going to move on to the Nederland EcoPass.
Thank you, Amy. And so I'm very pleased to come before folks tonight and talk about the Nederland EcoPass. If you go to the next slide. Most people watching the YouTube will probably not get a chance to vote on this. And so this map is to show the area that will be voting on this. So when there's a special district, the commissioners sit as the special district board members. And so in this case, the county commissioners sat as the Nederland EcoPass district board members and put forward something for the Nederland EcoPass district residents to consider. And that is, should they like to extend an existing tax, again, without raising taxes. All of our measures we put forward are without raising taxes, no new taxes. We heard that loud and clear. But would people like to continue their EcoPass program? And so this, on the left-hand side, you can see the district boundaries. They do not completely overlap with Nederland. You can see the town is tinier inside of there, and the Nederland EcoPass district encompasses more area. So people up and down the canyon, and then a bit north of Nederland and west of Nederland can all benefit from taking the bus in and out of town. And then on the right, you can see boardings by route. So this is over the last period of time that the program's been running. You can see the preponderance of people have been riding the NB bus, but folks have also been on the Skip and the Boulder and the Flatiron Flyer, even Denver buses and others. We can go to the next slide. So what happens if people currently are voting on a tax extension? It currently is a property tax that funds this measure at the rate. Helen, I've got this number right in front of me, so you'll be happy to know it is. Oh, I thought it was right in front of me. 1.85 mils. It's about $12 million a year that it's been generating. I'm sorry, it's about $12 per $100,000 of residential property, I should say. That it is. And so it would just be to extend that. And what it would do would be allow residents to continue to have eco-passes if they say yes. And if they say no, we would have to end the eco-pass program for the district. So it would allow people to continue to be taking the bus without having to pay a fare when they get on. And what we would be able to do in this next 10-year period is extend the eco-pass program to people who are employees within that district. So people who may live in Denver or Boulder or Louisville or Lafayette or Erie and work in Nederland would then be eligible to get an eco-pass because their employer is paying, right, the tax in the district, and we'd be able to extend it to residents. So that is what we would look to change, but it would still be at the same tax rate. And Amy's right, this is 6A Nederland eco-pass for the folks that are in the district that get to vote on this. So if it passes, then they would continue to receive eco-passes for the next 10 years. And if it does not pass, we would have to terminate the eco-pass program. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Any questions on the Nederland eco-pass? Questions on the Nederland eco-pass?
There might not be folks on. If people watch this on YouTube, feel free to reach out if you have questions.
Yeah, and your contact info will again be in our resource document that everybody already has access to.
Yeah.
All right, then we'll move on to the next one. Thank you so much, commissioners, for coming and explaining the county issues to us. We really appreciate your time and your effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, Boko Tims. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. All right, next we'll move to City of Boulder issues. Yes, on 2A is the first one. It's the City of Boulder sales and use tax, and our speaker is Elizabeth Patterson. And Elizabeth, as you come on, you can introduce more about yourself. I don't really have all that information, unfortunately, but I'm sure you can tell us about yourself. So this is 2A, and Elizabeth, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Britta, and the whole team. It's been great to work with you. I'm here following the Senate President and the 2 county commissioners, so no big deal. Anyway, this is the City of Boulder's 2A. This is a sales tax extension, and it is 0.15 to help Boulder thrive. That's 15 cents on a dollar. And we're taglining this a win for public safety, human services, and the arts. Next, please.
Elizabeth, I think you said that wrong. Is it 15 cents on the dollar? It is 15 cents.
15 cents on $100.
Oh, on 100. Okay, I heard you wrong. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, spend $100 every time you leave the house now. Anyway, this is an extension of an existing tax. Due to expire in December of 2024. So it's effective in January 2025, and the extension is to December 31st, 2044. So we are not kidding when we're saying this is a once in a generation opportunity to make these critical investments. It is estimated at 7.5 million. And the ballot language allocates 50% to the general fund and 50% to arts, culture, and heritage. There is a more specificity in the ballot language, 50% for fire and emergency response services, public safety services, human services, homeless solutions and services, parks, and other general fund purposes. This comes in an opportune time to bring this forward because the recently passed library district generates savings that will cover the additional arts investment. And this is supported by council, was advanced by council. Some of you who followed it closely may know that this started with a petition drive from the arts community, and early on, those folks, that coalition put their heads together with city council to see how this could be a win-win-win. Next, please. The renewal of this tax does provide critical funding. The city manager says that this is critical to the finances, and Mayor Brockett says that it fits comfortably within the anticipation of the $10 million savings from the library district. So this will not necessitate any cuts, and instead will support the arts community that is really a revenue generator for sales tax within the city, and for those who come into the city to enjoy what the different productions. Next, please. Why is this needed now? Boulder spends 60% less than comparable cities on arts and culture. It is, even after this passes, it would be less than 1% of the city's budget. There's a pie chart on the website, which is 2A for all, and it shows the tiny little sliver. The arts funding traditionally does get cut first in the city and within our schools. And it is really also in conjunction with the library district. The cultural planning process begins next year. So lots of people have brought input on what the arts funding does. Next slide, please. Diversity, equity, and accessibility and inclusion. Decades of research show that this builds cross-country, cross-cultural. And we are really proud to, I'm sorry that I've lost my place here, but at any rate, this increases social cohesion and it makes communities more welcome to all. If you would go to the next slide, please. And why should you support it? The arts generate $90 million a year in economic activity, and much of that comes from outside of Boulder when you think of who comes to attend events and where they're spending their money. This would promote safety in public places and continue critical human services funding. And again, it is a way to make us a more welcoming and diverse community. Next, please. We have a great many endorsements, and we've been so busy, some of them have not come up here. We have been endorsed additionally by Plan Boulder and by the Boulder Progressives. We have a lot of individual endorsements, and over 30 arts associations have come forward to support this. And I hope that you will support it too. Are there questions you have for me?
Actually, what we're going to do, Elizabeth, is we're going to take the other side now, because there's two presenters on this, and then you'll have 5 minutes shared to answer questions, and we'll just go back and forth with the questions so that you both can answer any questions that come up. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll unspotlight you for a minute, and we will bring up Patrick Murphy, who's going to speak on the no side of 2A. Whenever you're ready,
I'll wait for that. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name is Patrick Murphy. I'm a botanist plant ecologist. I've lived in Boulder 53 years, and I'm 72 years old. The proposed 2A tax extension will be divided in half to support art instead of its past use to primarily fund essential services. Slide 2. The tax would collect something in the neighborhood of $7.25 million each year, but instead of being totally applied to fire and emergency response services, public safety services, human services, homelessness solutions and services, parks and other general fund purposes, there would actually be a reduction of about $3.6 million per year. Slide 3. A survey conducted by the city asked for what issues voters would like to have the funding increased. Arts was at the bottom of the list. All of the items they wanted to have increased funding would actually get reduced funding by $3.6 million each year. That's $72 million over the 20-year life of this proposed tax. Slide 4. The other side of the coin was evaluated by the question of what things should have funding reduced. Arts was in the top 3 with very little support for reducing the funding of the essential services. Slide 5. The other side of the, let's see, the arts are great, but need to stand on their own and not parasitize essential services. In my opinion, the arts tax should be a new tax that would probably fail, and that's why it was slipped into the existing tax. It's a poison pill that should cause 2A to fail and cause a redo next year, with the entirety of the sales tax applied to essential services, and a new tax for the arts should be subjected to a separate vote. Slide 6. Vote no on the 2A sales tax extension because we have too many needs that are essential. Let the arts stand on their own, and I do wish them luck. Ready for questions, I guess.
Okay, so we'll reset the timer and we'll bring Elizabeth up and spotlight both Elizabeth and Patrick, and we'll put 5 minutes on the timer. Who has questions about 2A? And if you do, go ahead and raise your hand, your virtual hand, or type them into the meeting chat. Okay, here's a question from Guy. Guy, go ahead.
I guess I'm a little lost about how this is being part of the library district, or not the library district, but the former library monies, and yet was going to firefighters and whatnot. I'm really kind of confused about what that $10 million chunk that this is $3.7 million of is.
So the way we'll do the answer is I'll give Elizabeth 30 seconds. I'm just timing that on my iPhone, and then we'll have Patrick answer. So go ahead, Elizabeth.
You're looking for clarity about how the library savings help support this? I'm not sure what the question was. Sorry.
All
Yeah,
right.
I was just to like, you're talking about $10 million a year in library funds, and then this $3 million. But as he was pointing out, this is extending a tax that was previously going to essential services. So
And
how does the fit into this?
And it will still go. It will not necessitate any cuts in services, and it's been confirmed by the mayor and the city budget staff. The fact that the general, and also the arts are a powerful economic engine that generates a great deal of incremental spending at local restaurants and things like that too. So it is an investment in something that is already profitable and will continue to be profitable. The library is a separate
30
issue.
seconds, that's time, sorry. Okay, and I do want to encourage people, if you don't get the full answers you need, you will have contact information for all the speakers. So you'll be able to get the answers that you need and want.
We
All
also
right.
have very detailed FAQs on the website, very detailed.
Great. And if you haven't sent that link to me, do send it to me. All right, Patrick, we'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
library district money isn't even really certain yet. They've got so many things they have to decide, lease, sell, all that sort of thing. That money has lots of places to go. It'll always have places to go. If you're looking at this picture right now, you can see we have lots of things that need that $10 million.
Yeah, maybe you could take his slides down while we're discussing this, if you don't mind, in the interest of fairness.
Sure.
Thank you.
So that money that would go to these services.
Sorry, time. Sorry about that. Let's go to the next question, Mike. You or Britta put one in, and then we'll go to Mike. Britta said, does the city collect taxes when there's a concert in Folsom Stadium? Patrick, you can answer this one first. Go ahead.
I have no idea.
Okay. Elizabeth?
I don't think the city owns Folsom Stadium.
Okay.
I doubt it. I don't know either. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you. All right. and-
I can find out.
Okay, yeah, well, and yep, that would be great. I'm resetting my timer, and Mike Altenburn, what's your question? Go
Sure.
ahead.
Well, my question is, this is a tax extension. So if we vote it down, doesn't that mean that there will be no money for anything, whether it goes to the arts or essential services?
Hey, Elizabeth, you can go first.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Long time no see.
Yeah.
No, because it doesn't expire until the end of 2024. So there could be another bite at the apple, but I'm hoping you'll pass this one.
Right. But if it doesn't pass at the end of 2024, the money goes away.
That's true, but they could run it again in 2024.
Well, they could, but it might not pass then if it doesn't pass now. I guess my point is no matter what it's intended for, if it doesn't pass, there's not going to be money down the road for anything.
Okay,
Anything.
the timer went off, so now it's, I know you were talking back and forth there. I'm gonna give Patrick a shot at this. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, that's not really true that there won't be money for anything if it doesn't pass now. If it doesn't pass now, it'll be a clear message to City Council. They need to split the art vote from the essential services vote. And that would probably mean that people would be much more willing to vote for essential services, and let the arts take their art vote directly to the public and not bury it in an essential services vote.
Okay, there's the timer, so thank you. And I think we're gonna have to move on because both timers have dissipated, so I just want to read, there was another question, what share of current tax has gone to the arts? And you can certainly get a copy of the chat so that you know which questions need to be answered. And then Commissioner Stoltzman typed in, there's not a tax on the ticket sale, but there are sales taxes if people go to eat and things like that. And then Guy said the city doesn't own other venues like Boulder Theater. So we're going to wrap this one up, and I thank you both for being here and conforming us and answering our questions. And you're welcome to stay for 2B, the next one we're moving on to.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 2B, we should have Alicia here, the city clerk. Is she here? I'm not seeing her in our list of people. So if not, then we do have slides on this, though. We'll run through them. And Britta, do you know anything about Alicia by any chance?
I don't know anything about Alicia, but if there's nobody to speak, I might be able to explain some of the stuff.
Okay, well, if you want to, I'll go through her slides and you can take a crack at it.
But let's give her, why don't we move to the next city issue and then come back, give her a chance to,
Okay, we can do that.
yeah.
So I'll just go through the slides and we'll come back to this one, which means we're going to go to 302, safe zones for kids.
All right, you got it.
So let me make sure that we have Carrie White, John Neslodge. Is that the correct pronunciation of your last name, John?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and Jennifer Rhodes. So they're all
Yes.
together, right? And you'll all lean in or something or however.
Yep, I'm going to do the
you're going to
presentation and
go.
then there, yep.
Okay, and so this is the proponent side, and then we will have an opponent side. So we'll give you 5 minutes to do your presentation. And if you're ready, I'll go ahead and click on the first slide.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Rhodes, and we are from Safe Zones for Kids. We are a group supported by over 5,000 community members who signed our petition. Our endorsers are the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Boulder Partnerships Board of Directors, Plan Boulder, John Tayer, Tina Marquis, former BVSD president, Tara Weiner, Mark Wallach, and Bob Yates, and many others. We believe that all students, can you not?
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
We believe that all students deserve safe environments around schools and on the pathways they use. And we also believe that solutions to the bigger challenges are needed. It's not either or. Next.
We are a pro-safety for children ballot measure. Our goal is to improve public safety for young people of all backgrounds and abilities around schools and on the paths they use. Next. Keeping students safe should not be controversial, and it should not be negotiable. Achieving the prioritization of kids in our public spaces has been inconsistent due to variable enforcement. Next. And we also understand the traumas and needs of many of those experiencing drug addiction and mental illness. We share concerns that solutions are needed for the mental health and drug crisis in this community. This ballot item does not preclude any proposed solutions towards the myriad challenges the community faces right now, and it does not preclude anyone from getting the help that they need or want. Next. But at the same time, we also understand the psychological and social needs of kids. Safe Zones for Kids is a needed public safety measure for kids. Next. And we're already making a difference. With the pressure that this campaign has put on the city is working harder to try and keep these zones safe for kids, as evidenced by the fencing that just recently went up around Boulder High, in an admission essentially that more needs to be done. But what we like to do is to codify the prioritization so it becomes the law. Next. Schools and paths that kids use to get to school are simply not being prioritized. Next. This was taken a week, the first few weeks of school. This was the school's right in the background. That's Rect Field. Next. This was in last March. Those tents remained there for 2 weeks. We reported those in our group for every day for 2 weeks. The one in the distance had the tank that exploded. Next. And obviously in both these slides, the school is right there. Next. This was written by a child therapist who has seen a significant increase in child anxiety disorders over the past several years in relation to the crises that they've endured, that our community has endured. I'm an adult psychiatrist and treat hundreds of adults whose anxiety and mood disorders relate directly to not feeling safe as a child. This city has had a grocery store shooting, 3 school shooting threats, ODs outside our school doors that kids have witnessed, meth and fentanyl use prominent in our public spaces and next to schools, 3 stabbings in August alone, and now events this past Tuesday. We have to do better to protect our kids from the crises around them in our community. Next. Frustrations are rising regarding the unsafe conditions in our community due to drug and public health crisis that we're experiencing. These are opinion pieces by people that are not part of our committee, but are aligned with us. And yes, we also need to find solutions to solve the drug and mental health crisis. But even the Daily Camera editor sounded frustrated in his recent article when he said, meaningful results may still be months or years away. Next. Months or years away. So what we'd like to do, an amendment now to BRC 8321, which is an existing law right now, which concerns the removal of prohibited items. We'd like to prioritize the removal of prohibited items from within 500 feet of schools and 50 feet of multi-use pathways. And it's important to note our ballot measure language says subject to prioritized removal. That's the language. Enforcement is controlled by the city manager and determined by a point system. And we want schools and pathways to get whatever number of points is required for the city to take action. Next. Our opposing committee is not comparable to our committee. We are a group of over 5,000 supporters. We are focused on kid safety, and we agree it is past time to shift strategies. And in the meantime, let's keep all students safe. Our opposition has nothing to do with public safety of kids. They have not proposed a way to keep kids safe. Next. And frankly, waiting until we have all the solutions and answers is not problem solving. It's a stall tactic. Next. So in summary, we would like safe zones around schools and paths to get the highest points assigned to compel the city to take action. Enforcement has been inconsistent, and we believe that keeping kids safe should not be controversial.
Thank you. And we'll unspotlight you now for a minute and bring up Douglas Hamilton, who is leading the no on 302. This, by the way, is 302 for those who hadn't gathered that yet. Safe zones for kids and not safe zones for kids. All right. So solutions, not safe zones. Douglas, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'll bring up your first slide.
Good evening. My name is Doug Hamilton, and I've lived in Boulder for 10 years. I'm a military veteran, and I have 2 girls at Centennial Middle School, one of which will go to Boulder High next year. I am requesting the Boulder County Dem endorse a no vote on ballot measure 302. Next slide. Measure 302, with its limitation on prohibited items within 50 feet from any school or sidewalk, and 500 feet from any school, would enshrine a citywide camping ban that cannot be overturned but for another ballot measure. It makes no provision for any services for those displaced by this measure, and it makes no requirement for these folks to have shelter. The 2022 Boulder County Democratic Platform calls for the elimination of camping bans when they are not when there is not appropriate resources to house people, because these bans are inhumane. A no vote is endorsed by our 2 registered Democratic mayoral candidates and a host of registered Democratic council candidates and 3 school board members. And the yes campaign is, at least last I checked, endorsed by 1 mayoral candidate and some city council candidates that until recently, I believe, were identified as Republicans. My grandpa thought that was a bad word. Safe zones won't work. Next slide, please. Where they have been tried, they have failed because constantly pushing people around the city without alternatives is futile. According to the April 13th, 2023 memo written by our city manager and chief of police, among others, they have noted that implementing school zones is challenging and that a safety zone around schools would not add to Boulder's enforcement toolkit because camping is already illegal around schools and all public places, and schools receive the highest priority. Next slide, please. Measure 302 is bad policy, and the Boulder County Dems should vote to condemn it. It will not make children safer. All of the things that my opponents mentioned, 302 would not prevent. The ballot measure pits one powerless group, children, against another powerless group, the homeless, forcing voters to demonize one and to protect the other. It's a false choice only meant to play on emotions. Republicans in other states are using children or the protection of children for similar laws to ban books, to ban trans kids in sports, and to ban healthcare for trans youth. While there's definitely safety risk of all sorts to children and people having to live outdoors, this ballot measure solves none of them. This is the first time Boulder voters will be asked to weigh in on homeless, pushing an enforcement-only solution. This doesn't match with our values as Democrats. As Stacey Davis Gates, president of the Chicago Teachers Union, says, the only way we will have public safety is when we invest in our community from a bottom up. Democrats have led the way in this investment. We saw that this in COVID with the child tax credit and rental assistance championed by Dems, and much of the homelessness we are seeing today is because these policies have lapsed. The city of Boulder has spent millions tweaking camps. Some of this money could be used to invest in services and housing that get people off the streets. Advocates for this measure say it costs nothing. This is not true. It costs us our time and money to implement this failed policy. It is already illegal to camp and have propane tanks near schools. Nearly 383 camps and nearly 100 tons of material have been cleared from our city this year alone. That's like 1.2 or 1.5 a day. We are living in this safe zone world now, and it isn't working because our system is producing more homeless people than those are exiting homelessness. Propane tanks can be and are removed immediately according to the city policy, but campers just move down the road because there is no place for them to go. Now they have to acquire new survival gear and become more precarious with each day. Making people more precarious decreases safety. Harm reduction, housing first, mental health, and addiction treatment are DEM strategies that have been effective with the VA and the city of Houston. Finally, laws targeting groups of people are immoral. History has shown us that when we target groups, we dehumanize them, and this leads to harsher and harsher consequences for these groups. In conclusion, we Democrats should reject this law and order measure, as it's been termed, and should focus on what we do best, investment in this community and solutions. Vote no on 302.
All right, very good. I'm going to ask Tim to reset the timer for 5 minutes and highlight the first group who's also going to be involved in the questions and answers. And I will run a 30-second timer when we have questions. So we already have a question from, oh, there's a couple questions. So I'll read this one out loud and then I'll start the 30-second timer. But Tim, go ahead and start the 5-minute timer, please. So this is from Dan Williams. Jennifer, if this measure is helpful for, we'll let Jennifer's group go first. If this measure is helpful for student safety, why haven't either the BVSD Board of Education or the Boulder District Attorney endorsed it? And why is Boulder's Mayor Aaron Brockett endorsing a no position on this? Follow-up, you mentioned Daily Camera editor Gary Garrison, but he hasn't endorsed your measure, has he? So Jennifer and your group, go ahead.
I didn't say he endorsed it. I said even he said in his comment that solutions are years away. The other questions regarding you'd have to ask Aaron Brockett. I'm not sure.
Right. And we, as we work through, contacting folks for endorsements, we have some that, we potentially will have endorsements from Boulder Valley School District folks.
Okay. All right. Let's go to you, Doug, for your answer to this question.
Well, I think that the mayor, the chief of police, who stated in their memo that this is not going to be added to their toolkit. So that's probably why, I don't think the chief of police can endorse anything, but the mayor has voted against it or taken a position against it. We have 3 BVSD school board members who have endorsed our measure. I think that they're afraid that this will lead to SROs back into the school, school resource officers.
Thank you. All right. The next question is submitted by Eric Budd. This time we'll have Doug answer first and then Jennifer et al. Answer second. What fraction of the city public property would be prioritized by the 50-foot from sidewalks provision, and by prioritizing so much property near sidewalks but not near schools, won't this actually decrease enforcement close to schools as compared to current prioritization rules? So go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, we make the argument that it's pretty much the entire city. And yes, when you deprioritize everything or prioritize everything, you deprioritize everything. The current matrix that the city uses, I think, puts schools as number 1. I would note that, I think that, they could have made it measured just for 500 read-around schools, but that's not what they did. I don't know why they have so much. They say multi-use pass too. I'd say that.
Off. Sorry to cut you off.
So the sidewalks and multi-use pass are included because our students need to get to and from school safely. There's actually, just as much safety issues associated with that. Often students are not with adults and have had to deal with some dangerous and uncomfortable situations where they are making. I also want to address that the ballot measure does include subject to prioritized removal. So not all sidewalks at all times are prioritized. We will count on SAMS and the Boulder Police Department to use their best practices to prioritize what they need when they need to. So not all sidewalks at all times.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to split the time evenly between you and let you kind of continue your thoughts. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right, Jennifer and group, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds just for final thoughts, and then we'll let you.
I just have a quote that I'd like to say from by Chief Harold. She says, "I support the prioritization of the cleanups and enforcement around schools and paths regarding our ballot measure." So it's false that she doesn't support she has not endorsed us, of course, I can't say that, but she gave us that quote. So I just wanted to say that.
It's a mischaracterization to say otherwise. And I would add too that Why does the mayor oppose this? This has been so poorly run, so poorly administered over the last 2 years that we've been advocating, reaching out to them to contact them. I'd want to hide too. So oppose it because you don't want the metrics to see the light of day.
Thank
There-
you.
Yep.
All right, Doug, I'll give you 30 seconds.
I mean, they wrote that in their memo. You know, I don't, if she wants to retract her statement, maybe she could take that up. I think what I'll say is 383 camps have been swept this year. How much harder, you know, how many more resources are we going to put to just moving people around the city? I think that we can invest in things like a mental health treatment center that would, you know, actually get addicted people off the street with wraparound services, things like that. You know, we need to start doing it now, because otherwise, you know, we're going to be here next year and be in the same position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. Oops, my timer's still going. Thank you all for coming here. Thanks for giving us a presentation, answering the questions. And again, if you have resources that you haven't already sent me to include in our resource document, please send those, and also your contact information. I think I have it all for both sides in this case, but we really appreciate you being here. And let me restart the slides. And the reason I just turned it off was the feedback from the previous group, just to not give anybody an advantage. But let me go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint again. Let's see. Okay, we should be on Town of Erie reading of ballot measures, and we just need a 5-minute timer on this. There's 2. I will read this. And has Alicia shown up yet? I don't think so. Okay. Shall the Town of Erie's proposed home rule charter be adopted? And so that's it. And then they have a second one. That was 3A. This is 3B. And this is, I'll read this so everybody has it. If the Town of Erie proposed home rule charter is adopted, shall section 2.081 of the charter be replaced to read as follows. Section 2.08, compensation of mayor and council members. Number 1, the mayor shall receive as monetary compensation the sum of $1,200 per month, and each council member shall receive as monetary compensation the sum of $700 per month. Both amounts shall be adjusted annually according to the Consumer Price Index, the CPI for the Denver, Boulder, Greeley area, or such successor index promulgated by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The first CPI adjustment shall be applied January 1st of 2025. In addition, the mayor and council members shall receive such other non-monetary compensation or benefits as may be set by ordinance. Monetary compensation shall not be modified by ordinance. And that's that for Town of Erie. I can't answer any questions. I'm just letting you know what the issue is. All right, we will move on to the city of Longmont. So we need both John and Jeff spotlighted. And Jeff Friesner. So we have John Solomon and Jeff Friesner. They are both staff members. They're going to, the way this presentation is going to work is there are 3 ballot measures in Longmont. So we'll just need a 15-minute timer, Tim, because they're going to go through the entire presentation and then they're going to use their 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. So these are both city staff members. They can introduce themselves, tell you what positions they're in. And when you're ready, John, I think you're starting out, correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, we'll get going then.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm John Solomon. I'm the director of the Longmont Public Library. And Jeff will introduce himself when I'm finished. We are going to go through 3 initiatives that are on the Longmont ballot. And I am going to start with what the library initiative is. So next slide, please. So first of all, as you hinted at, we are here to share information about this initiatives. We will present both sides of the issue collectively in both of our presentations on all three measures. Next, please. So the first is issue 3C. This is for a new branch library and increased funding. Next slide, please. So what are our voters being asked to do? So you can see here, voters are being asked to approve a property tax increase, which would fund the construction of a new branch of the Longmont Public Library. This would be in addition to the main and one and only branch that we already have, as well as a sales tax increase for the ongoing operations of that new library, as well as all libraries. So part of the ongoing operations would include increased funding for the existing library. The branch library would be located at Dry Creek Park here in Longmont, or it could be a standalone building elsewhere in the city. The cost would be about $25.7 million for this new library. Next, please. So what could this new branch include? So diverse collections for all ages, including all media, books, DVDs, everything that you might expect in a public library. The Longmont Library is known for our robust Library of Things collection. This would allow us to expand on that and continue that in the new branch. Of course, we'd have computers, laptops, Wi-Fi high spots, other technology that would expand on what we already have here. Spaces such as study rooms, meeting rooms, computer and technology training classroom, outdoor spaces, as you saw represented in one of the renderings here before. Creative or maker spaces, something we don't have in our existing library, so that would be something we'd be able to add on. Quiet spaces, a teen space, dedicated children's and storytime space. Our existing library we've outgrown, and we don't have room to hold story time within our own children's department. And of course, things people come to expect these days in a modern public library. So plenty of power outlets, places to charge your devices, seating, workspace options, programmings for all ages, author talks, free Wi-Fi, of course, 24/7, and our well-renowned homebound services for people that cannot come into the library. We would expand on that here. Next, please. So there are, of course, two sides to this. This is what we will be presenting on here. So those who would like to see this pass, the current library and staffing and all the services we have, we're meant to support a population of up to 65,000 people. Of course, Longmont now is right around 100,000 people. So the library really needs to grow to continue to support Longmont residents. The new facility would provide residents with the ability to experience new library services currently unavailable, as I mentioned before, such as creative and maker spaces that we don't currently have. And the library has historically been underfunded, not uncommon in public libraries. And the current service levels are not sustainable given the current and expected population growth of Longmont. And then those who might vote against this, construction of the facility and payment requires debt service, property and sales tax increases. The city really should find a different way to fund this type of project or delay construction until sufficient funds have been saved to complete the project without tax increases. The city already has a library that serves as a hub of learning and does not really need an additional facility. And an additional facility is not needed due to the amount of online content, classes, and books now available for free. Next, please. So what would the breakdown of costs be? So for the new branch library, again, about a little over almost $26 million annual debt service. You can see the numbers here. $1 million, that would be for 20 years. It would begin in 2024 for 20 years. The operation and maintenance of that new library, that's a sales tax increase of 0.09% on $100. You can see the number there. And then the operation and maintenance of the existing library, that's another 1.8 million increase of sales tax. That would be a 0.06 increase on $100 to support the increased funding of our current library, or basically all library services. And next slide. Sorry. Oh, maybe it's a different deck. Okay. Anyway, I think we're moving on to Jeff.
Yeah, we are. Mhm, that's right.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Jeff Friesner. I am the Director of Recreation and Culture for the City of Longmont. I will reemphasize that John and I are not here to urge people to vote for or against. We are just trying to provide information on the ballot to the best that we can. So the next item is ballot issue 3D, which is for an arts and entertainment center. Next slide. It is asking the voters to increase property taxes to construct a new arts center, arts and entertainment, and to also increase sales tax to pay for the ongoing operation of the center. Something a little unique compared to the other two projects is that a private fundraising effort is being required to raise $35 million in 5 years before the city's taxes would be implemented. The city would be asking for 45 million to go along with the 35 million that the private group would fundraise. Next slide, please. What would be included in an arts center? And again, this would all depend on once the 35 million is generated, the city would build a facility that would be able to be paid for at the time that all the money is collected. It could include an auditorium for over 800 to 1,250 people, a large stage for theatrical productions, a really good sound system, rehearsal and meeting spaces, and multifunctional open floor space for large events like holiday market sales, musical acts, and car shows. This particular project does not really have a location determined, but it could be built at Boston Avenue and Main Street, or at the Longmont Sugar Factory, which is on the southeast end of town. Next slide, please. Those in favor believe that the construction of a new facility that can accommodate large theater and music productions and provide multi-use space for events can help meet the current and future needs of city residents seeking arts and entertainment. A new facility would allow residents who currently have to travel outside of Longmont to access large events would be able to do that nearby. And the Longmont's population has outgrown existing venues, and residents have needs for additional options to meet and cultivate the arts. Those opposed, much like what John had stated before, construction of this facility and payment of debt requires property and sales tax increases. The city should find a different way to fund this type of project or delay construction until sufficient funds can be saved to do this without taxes or increased taxes. City already has venues that allow for arts and entertainment locally, and Denver's really not that far away for people to access. And then finally, Longmont's population won't sustain such a facility, and sales and use tax increases will remain in place indefinitely. Next slide, please. The question that is going to the voters is for $45 million. And then also that would be property tax, then also 2.5 million for ongoing operations. That would be the equivalent of $67.93 for a home valued at $500 and 9 cents on each $100 spent in sales tax. So that's the arts and entertainment. Next, I'll go to 3E, which is for recreation facilities. Next slide, please. Voters are being asked to do a multiple number of things that would affect recreation in Longmont. The first item would be to increase property taxes to build a new recreation center at Dry Creek Park. If you're familiar with that area, it's out by Silver Creek High School is one of the other facilities that's close to that. And then also renovations to the existing Longmont Recreation Center. It would also increase sales taxes for the ongoing operation of the new recreation center at Dry Creek. It would also include a land swap that would give the property that Centennial Pool currently sits on and exchange that property for the existing property that the YMCA currently sits on. It'd be a land swap. The Y would build a new facility where Centennial Pool is located. And then ultimately the city would put in probably some type of affordable or attainable housing where the existing Y is located. Included in the Y recreation facility would also be affordable housing of at least 100 units. $72 million to build the new recreation center and $12 million to construct, or the city's part of the YMCA project. Next slide, please. Included in the two facilities, the new recreation center would see some of the standards that you might see across our country: pools, fitness rooms, gyms, community rooms, outdoor spaces. And again, it'd be located at Dry Creek Park. The YMCA would build a facility that would have different types of facilities that would supplement what the city would do with the new rec center. It would include a pool with lap lanes, an ice rink, childcare, which is much needed in our community, and then also affordable housing. Next slide, please. Again, those that are in favor, Longmont population has grown since the current city's rec center and the YMCA was built, and these facilities no longer meet the needs of our community. The construction of new facilities with pools, fitness rooms, gyms, and ice can help meet the current demands and future needs of our city residents, and the YMCA childcare and affordable housing would meet critical needs in our community. The new rec center would be accessible to more people at its location, which is in a different part of the city. Centennial Pool currently would need to be, the city would need to spend $23 million to replace that facility, and ultimately would provide a much wider variety of activities for only $12 million investment. And the entrance to the YMCA would be at a reduced rate for city recreation pass holders. Those that are opposed, construction of the facility and payment of debt requires property and sales tax increases. The city should find a way to fund these types of projects or delay constructions without tax increases. The existing city recreation center is a great facility, and there is no need for expansion. The same comment about the Y. It's a great facility and really doesn't need to be torn down or start over. The net gain in the land swap, the city would only get 1.63 acres in addition compared to what the Y would receive. And then finally, a new YMCA facility membership will cost residents more than their existing city recreation membership. Next slide, please. The cost, $72 million for the new recreation center, which would have a debt service of a little over $5.5 million annually, and sales tax would need to be increased to cover the operating and non-operating costs, which is capital replacement of a little over $3 million annually. For that, that's $99.39 on a home valued at $500,000 and 11 cents on each $100 spent in sales tax. And then the final slide, please. And then for the YMCA, the project, the portion of it that the city would, city voters are being asked to fund is for $12 million. That would be two mills over 3 years, would be the equivalent of $71.50 for a home valued at $500,000. And then the tax would not be assessed until the Y was able to receive low income housing tax credits. So sorry, I went over just a little bit, but we can ask any or answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Tim, could you put their 5 minutes for each ballot measure, 15 minutes total on for questions and answers? Does anybody have any questions for John and Jeff? I have a question. How does it work for people who live in the surrounding area but not in the city? Because this isn't like a special district, but it seems like the burden is mostly on people who live in the city.
Yeah, only people that are Longmont residents are able to vote. Outside of the city, they're not able to vote.
No, not on the vote, but on the taxes is what I'm asking. Like people who live just outside of the city but use the city as their home base don't pay the same tax base, right?
They don't have the same tax base. If they use other facilities, they would help pay sales tax, of course. In recreation, where we have fees and charges, we do have what is called a non-resident rate, and those non-residents are required to pay a higher rate than Longmont residents. I really can't answer that in regard to arts and entertainment, and of course the library really doesn't have fees and charges, so that wouldn't be able to charge a non-resident rate for that.
Okay. Thank you. Guy, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. Now, if you're replacing the firehouse arts building with something else, what's going to happen to what is supposedly public access television that, as far as I know, still exists in that building? As my understanding is that it's actually run by a quote Colorado nonprofit, not by a 501c3 officially recognized nonprofit, so it doesn't have an independent board and those things. But what would happen for public access television? And I would just like to point out that as part of the Boulder County platform, Boulder County Dems platform, we have the statement that as part of the public, educational, and governmental PEG access, provide free, fair, and open public access television as a First Amendment freedom of speech forum for all U.S. residents on an equal and non-commercial basis.
These ballot questions would have no impact on their contract with the city of Longmont.
And to clarify, Guy, the public access TV here is run by Longmont
Public Media.
Public Media, and it's in the old Carnegie Library building. It's not in the firehouse.
Okay, so it's been moved. Okay, thank you.
And then Susie had a question, and then we'll go to Helen. So Susie, go ahead.
Hi, I live in Old Town Longmont, and this is a concern of a lot of people in this area, that all of these new facilities that are being proposed are going to be in Southwest Longmont, on the area going toward Boulder. And there are people in Midtown Longmont and up north in the northern part of the city that they're not getting a new recreation center. They're not getting anything out of this. And they're concerned about what the deal is with the YMCA, because it has not been very well articulated in the media, including our beloved Longmont Times Call, that is not the best source of information. So can you explain what the deal is with the YMCA and the land swap, and why there has not been a consideration for having any of these library facilities or recreational facilities proposed for anywhere other than the area that goes towards Boulder. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So I'll start with that one. So several years ago, we had a bond election that reviewed multiple sites within Longmont. At the time that we went to that ballot question, it was in 2019 for a pool and ice facility. And one of the things that was really vocal by people that voted against it was that we did not select a location. So we did select Dry Creek. Part of the issue that we haven't really considered anything in the north part of Longmont is that we would need to do it on property already owned by the city of Longmont. And we really don't have property anywhere in the northwest, which is, I think, where I've heard the most comments, that could be large enough to handle the size of facility that we'd be looking at. So did that answer? I know that doesn't make people happy, but that's why there isn't not anything in North Longmont. As far as the project with the YMCA, we at the city were approached by the YMCA about an idea that they had of wanting to build a new facility that would include an ice rink, knowing that the city had gone to a vote again in 2019, and that they also wanted to really do things more with lap swimming and that sort of thing. And on top of those two things that they would try to address as recreation needs within our community, they would also want to do have the opportunity to do affordable housing. As many of you may know, affordable housing is one of the top 3 priorities for the City of Longmont Council. And so that type of project really ticks off multiple boxes in trying to make things happen. The Y is interested in doing it at Centennial Pool because they know that the city has a facility that's 49 years old, and at some point in time will need to have a serious renovation, be replaced, or just closed down. And so their proposal also deals with a facility that needs to be renovated. We would take that down. They would build their new facility along with the affordable housing, and then the city would retain ownership of the property that they currently hold. So that's kind of the backstory as I know it.
All right. And Helen, did you want to ask your question or do you want me to read it? Okay, I'll read it. All right. Helen's question is there an arts center private group identified? Are they already fundraising? Who owns the arts center after it's built? And what is the total sales tax increase for the 3 measures? That's in the chat if you need to.
That's thank you for putting that in writing, because I don't know if I would have remembered all of it. So the Arts Center would be owned and operated by the City of Longmont. There is a group, a private group that is organized. And if you wouldn't have asked me, I could have been able to tell you their name, but it escapes me right now. The director of the Longmont Symphony is the spokesperson for that group and kind of leading that effort. As far as the total tax increase for the 3 measures, I do have that. And
while you're getting that, let me just interrupt to say that there is an article in our resource document. I post an article that was in the yellow scene that lists all those arts groups, actually.
Yes. And I think the Longmont Corral is also involved with that, but there was an editorial in Monday's Times Call that talked about what their interests are and why they believe that Longmont needs the arts and entertainment facility. So the total mill increase, if all three were to pass, would go from 13.42 mils to 21 mils. And the property tax increase on a home for at a value of 500,000 would go up, depending on what would be approved, anywhere from $135 to $274 a year.
Okay.
And
Susie, do you have another question?
well, I have a lot of older neighbors here in Old Town Longmont. And you know that our property valuations have gone up, skyrocketed. There are not many of us living in houses that are currently assessed at $500,000. And people are on limited incomes, and there's going to be a lot of older people in Longmont, and there are a lot of us older people in Longmont that we can't afford like another several $100s in our property taxes. You're going to meet some opposition, and unless these facilities are going to include something of value to older people, you're gonna meet some opposition.
Well, with
You're stretching out to the areas where there are younger families, and Longmont is going to be gun barrel before long. It's all stretching that direction. But the people who depend on the YMCA for our exercise, it's going to be a hard sell. So you need to take a look at how to make this feel like it's a benefit to all of Longmont and just not the expansion areas of Longmont. Is that unreasonable for me to tell you that?
No, absolutely not. But I'm not going to have a good response for you, because if I respond, it's going to take me out of the
realm of possibility.
Well, he's in a neutral position. So
I cannot take a position to
I
encourage
understand.
people to vote in favor or against. I think you have some very good comments. I would say that all of the facilities that we've described tonight will have opportunities for everyone in our communities, whether that's young people or seniors. And I just would ask that if people have questions, that I certainly can get responses back. There is a group organized that will do advocating, but John and I can't really be a part of that.
I understand. I just want you to be aware that there is a substantial portion of older people in Longmont who don't see any benefit coming to them, especially this thing with the Y. It's like 9th Avenue, and it's right near Old Town, where a lot of us live.
Yeah.
So you need to be aware there's going to be some substantial opposition.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Susie.
All righty. Good night, guys.
Is there any other questions that somebody would like to raise with John and Jeff? Going once, going twice. Well, I just want to thank you, John and Jeff, for coming tonight and explaining these issues to us.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to City of Louisville, and then we may circle back around to Erie briefly. So let me share my screen and get to the PowerPoint, and let's see. That's the end of Longmont's. Oh, there was some cumulative information here, which I had turned the slides off, but they did provide that. So Helen Moshak will be presenting on Yes on Louisville Open Space. And as far as we know, there is no opposition to City of Louisville's open space issue. So Helen, please begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Moshak. I'm a longtime resident and volunteer in Louisville, and I'd like to talk to you about protecting our open space by voting yes on Louisville ballot measure 2C. Next, please. Here's the scoop. On December 31st, 2023, in just 3 months, our current tax is going to expire. And so what this ballot measure proposes to do is give us a 10-year extension on the current sales tax, which is 0.375, and then add a small increase of 0.125%, and then dedicate this increase, the small increase, to open space land acquisition operations and wildfire mitigation. If this tax doesn't pass, then we'll have to make the city of Louisville and its citizens and our neighbors and our visitors will experience drastic cuts in our open space, parks, and other city programs to the tune of about $2.85 million per year. That $2.85 million represents 100% of the open space budget and about 2/3 of our parks budget. Next, please. We have a 30-year history of supporting open space and parks with our sales tax. It started in 1993 with this original tax of 0.375% to be spent exclusively for the acquisition of land for open space, buffer zones, trails, wildlife habitats, wetlands, preservation, and future parks. And these beautiful words describe also what the operations and maintenance funds and construction of these properties would support. It was extended in 2002 and in 2012 for 10-year increments, and now we're at the end of our 30th year, and we need to extend it again. Next, please. So specifically what this is asking for is we want to extend our current dedicated sales tax for another 10 years, which represents 3.75 cents on every $10 spent. It's going to raise that 2.85 million. And something new that we're doing is we're slightly increasing, but we're also further dedicating. And so what we're dedicating this 3.75% to is an equal allocation to open space and parks. And then the small increase, which represents 1.25 cents on every $10, will raise about $750,000 per year, and we'll be proposing to use that for open space land acquisition, operations, and very importantly, wildfire mitigation. Next, please. Why do we need to do this? Louisville's been voted best place to live 5 years in Money Magazine. Family Circle Magazine says it's a great place to have a family. And when you ask citizens and residents about it, open space is often top of the list. We have 31 open space properties that equal about 2,000 acres that are owned or jointly managed with Boulder County and/or Lafayette. We have 32 miles of trails. We have 350 acres of parks and playgrounds, courts and rinks, and we have hundreds of ranger education and volunteer programs. Next, please. In 2023 alone, we did a lot of work on resource management. We have goats and cattle in a grazing management program to help reduce fuel load. We've replaced playground equipment in 3 parks. We've done renovation in our community park. We're doing trail resourcing, and we just received certification as a B city. Next, please. So what we need to do with this money is preserve, conserve, and protect our wildlife and habitats. We want to create green spaces and green commuting options for our residents. We need to continue ongoing funding for operations, and we need to fund wildfire resiliency and future open space land acquisition. So we're asking for your support. Next slide, please. Please endorse Louisville 2C ballot measure. We're trying to extend. We want to further dedicate with more to create accountability and transparency for open space and parks. And we'd like to increase it so that we can make that investment in wildfire resiliency. Thank you.
I was muted and talking. If we could put 5 minutes on the timer, I'm sure that we would like to answer any questions that you may have about Louisville's tax extension. So who has questions? Ashley has a comment in that this is such an important measure for our community. Thank you so much for your work to keep our parks and open space funded in Louisville. I love the new clear division between parks and open space. Great work to the community volunteers behind this. Hi, Helen. Hi, Tamar. So that's a nice compliment. Guy, did you have a question?
Yes. I don't live in Louisville, so I won't be voting on this issue. However, my mom does. I was taking care of her through COVID in the Coal Creek Ranch South subdivision, which burned down almost absolutely entirely. And the reason it burned down was because of unmaintained edging around the Coal Creek Ranch golf course, which is city owned. So the fire raced through the open space areas that that had rough area around the edges of the course maintained at all, even through a 6-month spring, literally led to an entire neighborhood burning down. And so are the mitigation efforts that are going to be taken, because there's not a lot of stuff in certain parts of the city with as far as the the efforts of the city go to protecting homeowners. And so I don't mean to be contrarian, because I can say almost 100% certainly my mom will vote for this measure, but I would like to have that addressed.
Thank you, Guy. I can't speak for the city, but what I can tell you is that the city has completed a wildfire hazard and risk assessment plan, and that's being presented to council. And they worked with consultants on what we can do to mitigate risk and also create resiliency within the environment. And that plan presents a lot of options. And with this funding, the city would be in a position to make a plan into reality. So I think it would also involve a lot of feedback from citizens on how to implement this and what the priorities would be in rolling that out. And so I think I agree with you. This is really important, and it needs to be a top priority for the city.
Thank you. And there was a question in by Don Parcher, and then we'll go to Ashley, which Don's question was, what percentage would go to wildfire mitigation? And you just said there's a whole plan, so it's probably readily available information, I would guess.
Yes, from what I've understand there's been some very preliminary discussion in council about of that increase, the 0.125%. How will the city manage that in terms of setting a reserve possibly for open space acquisition versus what do we operations and the wildfire mitigation? So I think that the ballot measure does not have specifics about that. That will be done at the city council level.
Thank you. And Ashley?
I just wanted to say something about wildfire preparedness, just like as my perspective. So I was the mayor during the Marshall Fire, and now I'm a Boulder County Commissioner, and I've been in hundreds and hundreds of hours of meetings with fire experts and heard lots of testimony on this. And just first want to acknowledge that the community is still very traumatized. And if folks on the call have lost their homes, I'm very sorry. And there's still a lot of pain going on. But I just want to draw attention to our particular fire hit the town of Superior and then went through a paved Costco parking lot and then across a 2-lane road and then across a 6-lane highway and then across another 6-lane road. And so buffer mowing of a couple of feet of land on the edge of a golf course, unfortunately, would not have been the difference in our fire. Once what the fire experts have said in a lot of the meetings is like once a conflagration hits and you have so many fire brands, because in our case the homes were like the forest is in the wildfires in the forest, the homes led to the fire brands. Those fire brands can travel 2 miles or more, particularly in winds like we had. And so while in a fire with lower wind speeds or something like that, yes, the mitigation we're doing now in our wild areas would make a difference. I just don't want people to think that if a couple of feet on the edge of the golf course that was irrigated were mowed, it would have changed the outcome in our particular fire. Those embers from the Element Hotel, the 4-story hotel across the street, were traveling well into the neighborhood. And well into, fields actually quite a lot farther away. So it is very tragic what has happened. People are still struggling. People still need support and help. And I don't want to discount that at all. But I just want to kind of correct some of the record that, there was a huge highway and several concrete parking lots in between the source of the fire and the neighborhood that we're discussing right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Helen, very much. And we will move back to ballot measure 2 in Boulder, the administrative charter cleanup. We waited to see if anyway, Britta's going to speak about that. So I'm going to share my screen, and we had a clerk lined up to come, but who knows, things happen and people sometimes can't do what they meant to do. So we'll let Britta speak on this, and we'll have a couple words about Erie, just a little bit about, and then that'll be it for the evening. So I know we're running slightly over.
So I'd like to make it perfectly clear that Alicia did make these slides. She and I did have a conversation back and forth about the slides. I'm sorry that I didn't make it clear that we were hoping that she would talk about it, because she would have been great, but I will do my best. One thing that Alicia isn't allowed to do is to advocate or oppose anything, and I am, so I will. Next slide, please. So currently, if you want to run for the city council or as city mayor, you have to get 35 people to go to the city clerk's office to sign in the presence of somebody at the clerk's office. This removes the requirement that you have to be there. I've heard it expressed that, boy, that's a great party. You can still have the party. You just don't have to have the party anymore. Next slide. So this is the one that really confused me, because the first sentence is getting rid of charter amendments as opposed to legislative ordinances. They taking it out of the first sentence and adding a sentence at the end about charter amendments in accordance with state law. Well, hardly ever do we have things that aren't in accordance with state law. I think so this is my opinion, my guess. I think what this is about is that the procedure for charter amendments is not handled by the city. If you go to the city website and ask about how do I do an initiative, a ballot measure, you get the information, but you don't get it for charter amendment. So I think that this is just distinguishing between everything that's listed in the first sentence and now charter amendments. There's clearly a difference. But if you want to make a charter amendment, I would start with the clerk's office. Next slide, please. And these changes make it easier. I'm sorry. It doesn't make it easier. The job doesn't change. It's just how much time there is to do the job. So you're allowed allowed more time before the election, and you're allowed to have more time after the petition is submitted to certify the petition. This means that the clerk's office doesn't have to have overtime to make sure that all of the signatures are okay. So it's because of the savings of overtime that I would urge us to vote yes on this. I said to Alicia that I think it makes it easier. She said, no, it doesn't make it easier, it just changes the time. And I think that's a good point. And I think that there's only one more slide.
Oh.
No, I'm not sure I can answer questions. You can
Yeah.
try me, but
All right. Does anybody, I don't know if Britta can answer questions, but is there any thoughts on this that anybody would like to bring up for a minute or two? If not, then I'll get to the Erie, I'll just read the Erie. Unless Celeste would like. Celeste, did you want to? Well, thank you, Britta. Let's finish one before we move on to the other one. Thank you very much, Britta, for your summary on that. And Celeste, do you want me to go ahead and go to the Erie section? And stop sharing for a second. Go ahead.
Did you, you already did the Erie section, did you?
Oh, I meant, sorry, I did do the Erie section, but you're going to write something up and provide it to me as a resource, right?
Yes, we already, a group I'm with already has done a comparison of the current situation versus what's proposed in the charter, but we're getting it checked by we rewrote something that somebody on the Charter Commission wrote. So we're just making sure that our slight rewriting into easier language to understand is okay. And then we'll send it to you so that you can use it as a resource.
Okay. And then, oops, I didn't go back to the slideshow, but this is the last question that we have is the Town of Superior ballot question 301, which is also a home rule charter. Is your group also doing work on this, Celeste?
We're following it, and it's a standard question that is on the ballot anytime a town or city wants to start the home rule process. You put this question on, and then you have a second question, which is to elect people to that home rule charter commission. And there will be 9 people on the Town of Superior Home Rule Charter Commission. Only 11, I think, maybe 12 people are on the ballot. So most of them will become members of the Charter Commission. So,
okay. Is there anything else you want to say about both Erie and Superior's home rule charter?
yes, thank you I thought of something else. So that the superior question is the first part of the process, and that's what Erie did last year. They approved a home rule charter commission. The second part of the process is after the charter commission writes a charter, the citizens, the voters in that town have to approve it. And so that's the question that's on the Erie ballot this fall. The interesting thing is that you get 2 bites at the apple. So if the citizens in Erie do not like some things in the charter, they can reject it. And the charter commission can come back with a revised charter the next election, which the voters can then accept or reject. If it's rejected twice, and I don't think that's ever happened in Colorado, then the charter commission is dissolved and you have to start the whole process over again if you want to become a home rule municipality.
Thank you. All right, well, that actually concludes our evening, and we appreciate everybody being here. This will be posted, so for all your friends who you know will be at the EC meeting who didn't show up tonight, please encourage them to watch this. I will be sending out the links to all of this, as well as the resource document, which is just called Ballot Measures Information 2023. And if you're a speaker and you're still here, I think I've announced it a few times and you didn't give me all your resource info, just forward that to us again. And I thank you all for being here and have a really nice evening.